Good morning. Welcome to episode 238 of Hobby Hotline. I'm Danny, and I'm joined by the one and only Dr. James Beckett from Sports Card Insights. How you doing, Dr. Beckett?
Doing great, Danny. Always great to be here on a beautiful Saturday morning.
Exactly. As Pierce Bronson said, and what else do we have to do this morning? This is fantastic. Um, so a couple hellos this morning. Everybody's in quickly. Good to see we got everybody. Mad City Brew. Steven, good to see you. Chris Ramsey. We know this guy. Good morning. Thank you, Rich.
Okay.
um, Philly Joe. Guys, feel free to join in. I'm going to put the link also in the comments here. So if anybody wants to pop on. Stukes from Minnesota. Hopefully everybody's a little warmer than the last time I hosted was when it was negative 30 across the country.
I think Stukes is from Fargo, so he must go to Minnesota to get a little warmer spot.
I've
It's
never heard that
North
before.
Dakota.
Yeah, I guess from Fargo that would be.
That's where, yeah.
So let's start with an area that certainly is in your wheelhouse. SGC grading, and talking about grading companies, authenticated a RPA Lebron exquisite rookie. And if I can figure out how to use this, I will flash it up. And then they showed it on Twitter or on social media, and people said that patch has been altered with. They did an investigation. They agreed. So they regraded the card and came to an agreement with the owner. This is the card. And they labeled it authentic, altered, and it says altered patch. And this brought a lot of mixed reaction from people. One, should they have caught it originally? Two, what do you do once you've already graded it and you still have it in your possession? What's the fair way to handle it? And three, how much do we rely on what the card companies give us, and how much do they miss that come through the system? I guess are some of my questions. So I guess Dr. Beck, to start the morning. What do you think? Is this on SGC?
I think SGC handled it really well after all the facts came to light, but and I think SGC is doing great. So I think they've really come on strong. But I just point out, pre-COVID, this card would not have gone to SGC. Pre-COVID, it wouldn't have gone to SGC. SGC was super strong on the pre-war and vintage, but SGC's coming on strong. Uh, I I just think it's grading is a lot harder than what people think. And
That's
so if you haven't handled, not that you had to handle all of the other 99 cards within that run, but this patch switching, I think is a art that I don't know that I could detect. But I think I think SGC would detect it, BGS would detect it, CGC, PSA. Um, but it's hard. I mean, these are sort of one of ones, even though they're one of 99. And thankfully, there's some policemen out there, kind of that really observe these things closely. So I think in the final analysis, again, I think SGC deserves a lot of kudos for making it right. I mean, people keep saying that grading is just an opinion. No, it's an expert opinion. And my hope is, just like at BGS, which I have more familiarity with, that when a card like that comes in, it's not just looking at the one grader or a less experienced grader. It's probably a team effort. But these kind of things can get past the whole team.
Yeah, like you said, also, how many have you graded in the past and how well do you know the card? Chris Ramsey said, how did they determine the patch on the card was altered? I know it was from the public catching it on social media. I do not know the details. If anybody does, please put it in the comments or come on.
Well,
Uh,
I mean, basically, if it's serial numbered, you have. I mean, this is what's
Previous sales.
hopeful for all of the grading companies is they have more and more sophisticated digital photography that has resolution. that they can see, not that the patch was doctored, but there may be something on social media where that exact serial number was pictured with a plain patch.
Here's a great.
Like that, why mess with it? Gee.
Well, that's a whole separate point. Yeah. I think this is a great question because you just made the comment that grading is a lot harder than people realize, and the question for you is, what do you think is appropriate compensation at what level for card graders? Is it more of a skilled wage, more of an entry level wage?
Oh,
How, how's that for putting you on the spot?
wow, that's yeah. I love that question, but yeah, graders should be paid minimum wage. Come on, guys, do you not think this is not they're not this is very sophisticated. You have to have knowledge of the hobby, knowledge of printing technologies. There's a lot of training that goes into it. So the question is, this is the more interesting question to me is not that it shouldn't be a skilled wage and it'd be a reasonably highly compensated job because they have all other alternatives. So my question that we dealt with is, should there be some incentive compensation
Yeah.
for speed? And the answer we came up with is no. You can't pay people more to if they can grade faster. You want them to grade as fast as they should grade, appropriately fast. You can go a little faster on the simpler cards. Complicated cards like this, you don't want to pay them a bonus based on the value of the cards or the speed that they grade. You just want them to do a good job. And I know what we did. We had a lot of checks and balances to audit is probably too strong a word, but there's a lot of looking over the shoulder of making sure that even a veteran a grader needs somebody to say, "Hey, did you see that there?" or let's take a little bit more time on that. So it's really tricky, and now there's a little more mobility. There's so many grading companies out there that people can jump, or you can make money on your own. If you're a really good grader, you don't and you quit working for a grader, you can make pretty good money buying raw cards and pre-grading them yourself. So very tricky.
All right, we got Mike. Good
Hey,
morning.
Mike.
I guess better late than never, right?
Absolutely. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. It's nice. Looks like it's going to be a nice day. We had some storms last night and looks like it's going to be a nice day today.
We're talking a little card grading. SGC had authenticated a LeBron RPA patch and then had to go back and mark it altered after social media caught the mistake. So, talking about the quality of card graders, how they should be compensated, and the role we put on the grading companies is where we're at. I know you rely a lot on grading companies. Do you trust the autographs and the authentications complicitly, or as long as it's slabbed, it's good enough?
Well, first and foremost, I thought I had picked a really good patch to put in that LeBron card, but I guess I'll choose better next time. Autograph wise, I think the card company, and really it's only PSA, JSA does it, Beckett, authentication services does it. Look, nothing's perfect. And so I don't take it. It depends on the person, right? If it's Goose Gossage, I'm not really worried about somebody faking a Goose Gossage autograph. If it's Babe Ruth, I'd give it a little more scrutiny. Or there's certain players that are known, and even let's take Mantle. Mantle highly faked, right? And Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio, all those guys have been tremendously. There's tons of bad autographs out there, and so there are certain companies that are better at certain guys that just have a better database, that have a better way to authenticate them. And so I think it's on those guys, you just got to be really careful. There's,
Well, I think the autograph authenticators. I used to do a lot of autographs, and it was before the authenticating days, but there are known these are period. They're not forgeries. They're permitted secretarial or sister autographs, and so they have their own pattern. I think, frankly, Mike, that's easier to detect. That Willie Mays, hey, that's not Willie Mays. That's Willie. That's the clubhouse boy or something like that. DiMaggio, Mantle, all those people you mentioned. I think the authenticators don't have a problem with that. It's the artiste, newer forgeries where people are trying to copy exactly with modern pens and technology. You can't do auto pen because they can detect that, but something like that is made to look exactly because Joe DiMaggio's sister, it, you just know that was done by his sister.
Yeah.
In fact, they ought to just slab it and say it's autographed by his sister because
Yeah.
they know.
Hank Aaron had his wife signed a lot for him late, in his life. And it's easy to distinguish a Hank Aaron. A lot of his through the mail autographs were done by his wife. And those are easy to distinguish. I have several of them, by the way, signed by Mrs. Hank Aaron.
What do you do with them? Because you can't slab them.
I keep them as exemplars, honestly.
Mhm.
And I've gotten a lot of criticism for keeping known, not real autographs, like not tearing them up or destroying them or whatever. And first of all, it's my item. I can do with it as I wish, but I'm not trying to resell it or pass it off as not real. But I have the famous Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, Ted Williams picture where they're all three together and it's not real. And I have that as and really just a lesson for me.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, let's complicate it further because number one, I've got some triple signed photos like that are legitimately signed by 2 out of 3, and the third one is either questionable or inauthentic, is rejected. Okay, what do you do when you got 2/3 of a fabulous photo? And
Yeah.
the other thing that I don't hear talked about that much is that when the authenticators are denying something, that is an opinion as well. Now, it's a very expert opinion, but I've had, and I'm not the only one that's gotten cards back rejected that I completely dispute. That either
Yeah.
I know who I got it from or I know where I got it. And I think, again, it's an opinion. And my opinion is it's still good, Mike, but they would not slab it. And I'm not going to go back. I could go back to them. I have done that and said, hey, I'd like you to take a second look at this. This may be an early career version of this card, or he was on the run or at spring training and he's signing at an angle. And so I dispute some of these judgments that are made. But if you don't dispute it, you say, if it looks really bad, but how do you know Hank Aaron didn't say, you know what, I'm going to sign one. I'm going to try to sign it a little bit like my wife signs it. I mean, you can't know definitively, but I'll agree. You're probably 99% sure that Hank Aaron is not good, but there ought to be a market for that. I'd like to see it slabbed as either as an autograph that didn't pass, and then you could sell it. Now, if somebody cracked it out, they still have to figure out how they're going to get it. They can't get it to an authentic, legitimate autograph authenticator if it's not.
And to our point earlier, if the technology gets better where they can really photo and fingerprint these cards,
They'll
it'll
know
be,
it's been through before, right?
yeah.
Well,
So
I don't, but I'm going to send some. I will send something back through if I think, hey, I don't agree.
I have a question for you guys.
Just like some of the resubmission of grading, I got a 7 on a card. I think that's an 8 or a 9, and I can either send it back to the same place for reconsideration, or send it somewhere else. But it's not to get a better grade; it's to get the grade I think it deserves because it was my card, and it was pack pulled, and but usually they're right. Usually they're right. almost always they're right because they are experts.
I have a question for you guys. PSA DNA for a long time on their website had on the autograph authentication, they said we use our proprietary ink technology where they basically would mark every item that came through PSA DNA with some type of UV something detectable on their end. And I can't find it now on there. I don't know if they're still doing it.
It's a microdot.
A microdot. Okay. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if they were, I didn't know how it worked.
Well, then they've been very successful because if you don't know where it is, you can't replicate it. But it's a DNA something that they have a way to detect, but you don't, and I don't think there's a way for anybody to do it other than them.
I've never heard anybody detect one.
I wonder if they still do that.
Well, you know what? Even if they don't do it, there's a mystique. But I think they do it because they said they do it. They've been doing that for a long time.
Right.
It's not hard to do. But supposedly there's some DNA in the microdot or something that's unique that you can't replicate.
Why can't they do that with regular cards?
I think they could. I think what they're trying to do now, but that's actually adding an element to the card, and so that's frowned upon. With an autograph card, there's already stuff added to the card. It's called an autograph. But if it's a regular card, they don't want to do that. I don't know that it would degrade after 50 years. But again, like I say, if it's a microdot, I think they're trying to accomplish the same thing with what was it, Genamint? What was the one where it was going to have the kind of the fingerprint footprint of they're going to take a high res photo of the card, and at some level of specificity, that card is unique because of printing technologies. The ridges, the topography of the card. I don't know what they're doing, but we ought to.
Well, yeah, Nat Turner said they're still in research on that.
It's good that it's just a mystery. That's not a bad thing that people don't know how they do it if it's a deterrent to people trying to pull bad things off.
Real quick, good morning from the sports card shop. Good morning to Rex and everybody over there. Thanks for having us up on the big screen. Mookie raises a good question. Dr. Becker, you were talking about earlier, the speed and how graders are kind of looked at. Are they incentivized for accuracy, and how do you incentivize accuracy? Because that would need two graders.
I'm going to be pretty glib here, but I always like Mookie's comments. So the incentive is you get to keep your job. If you're not accurate, you're retrained. And if you're still not accurate, you're either demoted to being a junior grader or you're asked to go somewhere else. The accuracy, Mookie, is a given. And so the incentive is you keep your job. And if you're really accurate and you're the go-to guy, which some of the guys that have been there for 25 years are that, then they are more senior graders and that they're recognized by their peers as well as by management as being really, really solid.
Rich says, I thought I heard Nat Turner talk about a card which was resubmitted to PSA and they caught the alterations easily. Why? Because it was serial number and they kept a record of the first submission. I would assume serial number cards have got to be the easiest ones to catch alterations on, just because you don't even have to worry about fingerprinting. It's already identified for you.
If you had an original photo, I mean, you need to have the before and after, and
Sure.
more and more social media has that. So I think
and it's a good thing that, card companies don't put out identical serial numbers. That never happens.
You mean 2 1-of-1s?
Yeah. That's rare, obviously. I mean, super rare, but.
Well, there's always a lot of suggestions for how the card companies can do more stuff that's helpful to the collector. And if it resonates, they'll do it. But to have this complete database of all the cards, that's a photographic database of here's what every card looks like, I'm not even sure that isn't revenue negative. It increases costs. I don't know that it would even increase sales. It would cause for a lot of problems. When Rich knows that when we were with the company, it was hard to get information from the card companies because they're putting it out so fast. And sometimes what they did put out, we double check and see that it wasn't correct because they'd made some change. So it's the card companies. I just wanted to put out great cards, and the aftermarket can determine. Again, I just think with all the social media out there, you pull a great card, you're bragging about it, you're showing it, and if a year later it's got a bolder, more three-color patch in there that mysteriously appeared, that's again, crime needs to not pay, and people won't do that if they find out that if they get caught, it lowers the value. So don't do it because you will be caught. That's what I want to communicate.
John says the secondary market will never be defeated.
Well, wait a minute. Wait. John Keating, that it's a whack-a-mole. So in that sense, we'll never defeat the whole secondary of some of these bad people. But I think we can take them out one at a time. Just like in the whack-a-mole, I'm going to whack the one that pops up but another one's going to pop up, but I'm going to keep whacking till they're all gone. And so maybe it's a never-ending process, John Keating, but it's something we need to do. We need to keep pointing out what's right and what's good.
Yeah, we can't just throw up our hands and say, well, we're not going to get everybody, so let's not even try. That's unacceptable. Yeah. Right?
And I think that's what people want. I think that's why when stuff goes online and people identify the mistakes, they are reporting it and they are saying something to the grading companies. I think the public does want that. By the way, whack-a-mole, underrated boardwalk game. Just make sure we get that out there. Rich, you can hear the frustration in this. Take his word for it. It is still, capital letters, difficult to get great information from the card companies. So take his name. Take his word from that. And John Keating says, stop using my full name like my teachers used to. Well, why do I feel like maybe you deserved it then as well? Is there a sport that you would like to see more or less cards made moving forward? Okay, that's a good one. Is there a sport that is making too many or too little cards, Mike?
Baseball always makes too many, if you have my true opinion. But I don't mind it because I don't really buy new cards. I buy the flagship set, which, by the way, I like throwing this out there. It was weird. I got interviewed by Fanatics about the 2024 tops. And I'm like, do you guys know that I'm a vintage guy? They're interviewing me about it. And the truth is I kind of like 2024 tops. I'm interested to see them in hand. I think it's a different design. I was trying to rack my brain on what it reminds me of. When was their last black border set? 07, I guess, maybe. And I think it's a cool design, but it was ironic that Fanatics wanted to interview me about 2024 tops. That was fascinating to me.
The go-to guy on Modern.
Right.
By the way, the design looks like Miami South Beach, old school Miami is what I think it looks like with that neon team name. Stuke says, were there more fakes and shenanigans prior to the age of grading? I'll defer more to the two of you on that since I only had a few years before grading came along where I was really active. Were there more shenanigans or we're just catching more now?
It's proportional to price.
That's right.
It's proportional to technology. So increasing technology, increasing price, increasing publicity of record sales. Grading hopefully are the good guys. They're catching the bad guys and pointing it out. So hopefully we're catching them all. Not catching them all, but we're catching almost all of them.
Yeah, I think there's more shenanigans now, but there's been shenanigans forever. It was only on higher priced cards. It's all about risk and reward, right? So
speaking of which, the Pete Rose was the biggest fake card ever is Keating's guess, and that speaks to the price and the technology, I think.
Yeah,
On
but
both.
guys, what I'm saying is that with Pete Rose, the reason they could do that is they took raw cardboard that was, yeah, as I remember, it felt a little bit different than Topps cardstock for that Pete Rose rookie that was fake. It was counterfeit. Okay, and you could kind of figure out what it was, but they were taking raw cardboard with just putting ink on paper. So there's no downside to that other than getting caught. And probably in those days, well, there was a settlement that they were all stamped, as I recall. But this LeBron thing that we led off with, that's taking a perfectly great card, not a
Yeah.
perfectly good card, but a perfectly great card. And the downside there is that if you tamper with it and mess up, you've dropped the value drastically, I hope and I think. And so that's what puzzles me. And a lot of the modern shenanigans are doctoring cards that are already you take a vintage 7 card and you want to make it a 9, and so you shave one of the sides to make it perfectly centered, and it would have gotten a 9, but instead it gets caught and gets an A. It gets authentic altered, and you've presumably reduced the value. And so there's a downside. Whereas like the Pete Rose thing, there wasn't much downside there. So I'm more concerned. Well, both are concerns of creating a card as well as doctoring a card. I'm against both.
Mike, how do you feel?
Similar to Jim, it's again, to me, is the juice worth the squeeze? You, like he said about the LeBron card, that was already a very expensive card. How much delta could there really be by changing out the patch or whatever? That feels unnecessary. I do agree that doctoring or trimming or whatever of vintage cards, I think we see that a lot more. I'm sure that happens a lot more because there is a giant delta, as we know, between a 7 and a 9 on a 57 Topps card or whatever. There's a lot of reward for you know. And Jim, to your point, the 7 might cost $100 or $200, let's say. So the risk there is if you get caught and it turns into an A, it's now a $20 card. So you risk $80, $100, whatever it is. And then, but you could gain thousands of dollars if it comes back a 9, if it's not caught. And so I think there's more risk reward on the vintage stuff. And I think it happens, sadly, I think it happens a lot. And
you're even if there was an 80% success rate,
Yeah.
the 20 that you could get the 7 bumped up to a 9. I'm concerned about the other 20% of what happens if you murder 10 people and there's an 80% chance you're going to get away with it. That means you murdered 2 people that they convicted you of. You're going to jail. You're maybe going to be executed in certain states. And so there needs to be a punishment that says, hey, I can murder these people and I've got an 80% chance of getting away with it. That's not enough if the crime is enough. But if you've got an 80% chance of doctoring this 7 and turning it into a 9, an 80% chance of getting away with it, that 20% needs to be a deterrent that, you know what, if I get caught, I didn't just lose $80. I lost my reputation. I lost my, I don't know what else they can do. To me, it's borderline criminal.
well, it's fraud.
It's
right?
fraud.
So at minimum, it's fraud. But speaking of being criminal, I'm going to be a criminal. I promised my wife a day date, and I forgot I was on Hobby Hotline. But as much as I love talking to Jim and Danny and all you guys out there, I'm getting I need to I need to go do what I promised to her. And I'm sorry, Danny, I totally forgot. So
It's all good.
I'm glad I was able to come on here for a minute and at least show my face and not be a complete douchebag and and dish you guys, but
We'll talk about you when you're gone. Don't worry about it.
I'm sure.
Well, it's like the 80% rule, 80-20. You're here. Actually, you weren't here for 80.
I was here for 20.
It's the 2080, right?
Yeah. Well,
right.
Thanks, guys. I hope you all have a great Saturday, and
Okay.
I'll talk to y'all soon.
See you, Mike.
See ya.
Thanks.
Rich said, shoot, in the 1980s, hobby icon Al Rosen promoted a tool called Don't Get Fooled because too many cards were coming up short. And that was my thought, is so many cards were altered before grading. You know, how many cards are out there that were trimmed or altered before the grading company started? And let's bring in, oh, we lost him. Maybe Rich will come back. Rich, come on back if you want. So, Dr. Beckett, before the grading company started, there was trimming and altering. How many of those do you think stayed in the wild?
Well, if somebody did it, they shouldn't send it in for grading, because most of the trimming back in the 70s, and there was some, and 80s perhaps, pretty much pre-grading, it wasn't clumsy as much as it was probably 1/16 of an inch. And 1/16 of an inch, or anything more than 1/16 of an inch, the grading companies are absolutely going to catch that. The problem is now they've got these micro laser kind of shaving things to where they can do micrometers, or they can just shave just a tiny bit to improve edges and make the centering a little better. And so the measurement, and then if they flatten them out a little bit, it can get back to measure. So Rosen's tool did not take into account that if a card is pressed, it can then be slightly oversized and then micro trimmed. Like I said, in the 70s, it may even, Danny, it may have been more for aesthetics. You got this great card,
Yep.
you're not thinking about grading, and it's a little off centered, and you just I've had childhood collections that from people that I bought in the 70s and 80s, and the cards were trimmed because it just looked better. I've had 52 tops that were trimmed into 52 Bowman size. Is that talk about a felony?
I just got goosebumps. Uncle Rich, how are you? Welcome.
I am good, nephew Danny. How are you, sir?
Fantastic. I don't recognize you actually seeing your face. It's great.
I know. I like the box better. The disembodied box had some of my most intelligent comments ever.
Yes. So you have an easy time dealing with the card companies, getting all the information?
I don't want to say easy or hard, but I mean, we always try to get the information. It's just that there's so much out there that every single day, hey, this checklist exists. Can we get it imported? You cannot keep up. So when I say that, is they'll send a lot of information, and I'm sure the same thing happens at Beckett with the checklists and everywhere else who's doing checklisting, but there's no possible way to keep up. And you almost need a dedicated card company person at each of the major card companies to send a dedicated person or two at each place that does checklisting the information, because then you'll have the system set up. I mean, we had that problem 30 years ago. You can't always, and things change even at the last minute. I'm thinking about 1992 score. They changed some card for a great reason. They put an American flag card in. That wasn't in the original checklist. It became the American flag card. I don't think the other card exists. But still, hey, we made this change. You don't want to find that out when people are opening packs. I mean, so that it was a problem yesterday, and people change. I mean, I don't want to pick on Panini. They've had enough problems in recent weeks.
However,
God knows they've had enough problems in recent weeks. But every set they have with autographs, almost every set they have with autographs and relics, they change the numbering from what they put in to alphabets. Why can't you just make the checklist an alphabet so it comes in correctly in the first place, instead of everybody having to change? And then when they have to change, then the eBay listings aren't correct. and then everybody who can't list the cards. And so it's really helps the hobby. And you want to tax the hobby, make sure everybody gets the complete information immediately. And I mean that seriously. It's blocking and tackling. Rex and I were having a conversation,
In the
and
chat room.
I call this blocking and tackling.
Yeah.
Top Series 1 opens on February 14th. That's Valentine's Day. Danny, can you imagine telling your wife, hey, honey, no, we can't go out for Valentine's Day. I've got to go bust these Tops 1 so I can put them on sale quicker before anybody else does. Good luck with that if you go out on Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
My wife thankfully says we'll go out around it. We won't have to go out on Valentine's Day. We know that's too expensive. But it's blocking and tackling. Rex pointed out that he's able in his store to give chocolates to anybody who buys it. I talked to one of my friends who has a store a couple miles up the road. It's not Triple. I want to specify that. He can only bring in food for his store for him and his employees. He really can't do anything for anybody else for that. He's kind of locked into, I can only give you cards. Fanatics does a lot of great things. So I don't want to sound wrong, but they can do even better. You want a 10X, think about common sense.
Well, let me ask you a question. Most married people, I don't think, have a tough decision. So maybe the release on February 14th are for people that don't have dates.
Well, good point. Good point. Well, I can stop in and get a box on my way home. That won't be a problem. If I let it sit for 2 days, it's not an issue. But some people do want to post very quickly, from the box, because the sooner, especially with Topps flagship 1, the sooner you post, the better off you are.
This is the comment to top off. Ironic that Topps was a candy company. Yeah. That would have been the perfect
Good point, Rex.
We could have had a little bubble gum mixed in. Also, speaking of Panini, and not to pile on to them, they lost the UFC license this week to Fanatics and Topps. Now, I know that UFC and WWE have merged as one company, but it's still two different licenses, is my understanding, and WWE has not transferred yet. But the UFC is now going to come out from Topps later this month. Is that big news that UFC is moving, or
it's always big news? But remember, WWE already has a contract at some point to go to Fanatics, right. So it's big news, but it's not unexpected big news.
Well, no, it's big news, but it's news that was negotiated because Topps had to be already in the works. So this is not a split-second decision. This is the way it's going, and Panini, whether there was any consideration, you're not hearing a lot of name calling and things like that, but it sounds like they pulled the rug out from under them. And in reality, I think there were discussions because of all this other litigation. They don't need to have litigation. If somebody wants to leave at the end of their contract or make a change, there's usually provision for that. So the fact that it wasn't rancorous makes me think they worked it out.
And let me work backwards, and please, either one of you, if they're going to release later this month, when did the production of that set really have to start?
6 months ago.
UFC is a little smaller than baseball in terms of the amount of people in it, so you might be able to have a shorter timeline even than 6 months to get a set ready.
Okay, well, we haven't addressed this, but basically, when Fanatics is going to 10x the hobby, that also means they probably need to, or having the capability. I know with all the people they've hired in the last year that had a lot of experience, they're probably able to speed up the product development cycle. And again, if you're going to do 10x, you can't be taking a year to contemplate making the perfect product. So I feel like they're starting to get revved up to be able to produce things quicker. And that's an example.
And as I say, you have a smaller universe in UFC than you do in baseball or football or even basketball of people in the sport. So you don't need as much time to prep. You have to think. You have to think. I mean, obviously in football, you're going to put Patrick Mahomes in every set. You're going to put Travis Kelce in every set. You may even put Jason Kelce in every set. You might have a Kelce brothers card. But as Jim and I talked about the Kelce Taylor Swift, listen to the podcast in a few days. I think you'll enjoy it. Just a little hint of what's coming up. But it's still, you're dealing in football. You have 30 teams, 32 teams, 50 players on each team. Even if you're whittling down, you have to whittle down from 1,600. If you have 160 people in UFC, and I'm making this number up, so don't quote me. But if you have 160 people signed to UFC, that's a pretty easy number to whittle down from. If you're whittling to 100 from 160, that's not that hard.
And I would also assume not having the team name, the team logos, and that approval process on all the cards has to speed it up to some degree.
Guys, it's fast forward in the next couple of years, you're going to be able to put these sets together, the basic set by AI.
Yeah.
Grab this photo, frame it in there, put in the name, the team or the nickname or something like that, write up a back. AI can do all that stuff. And so I really feel like the complications in product development are not the photos and the names and the art design. That can all be automated. What's tricky are the autographs, whether stickers or on card. That's what takes time. Game used or match used things. That's what takes time. But just, Topps Now and Panini Instant, you want a card? If it's just ink on paper, you can get a card.
I mean, Panini
Instant ratios and all that stuff. That's what's tricky.
I mean, Panini Instant, Topps Now, they have their cards out in a day or so after any event.
Yeah.
So, because as Jim points out, it's easy.
Well, and Fanatics having the leagues as investors should, you would think, smooth over the process of getting athletes to sign, because the players' unions are going to be investors as well. So, you think going on the road and getting somebody into their hotel room to sign a batch of cards is only going to get easier for them, not harder. So, just my thought there. Dr. Beck, the question was asked to you in the chat up top. I forget where I lost it, but it was basically, how do you define 10x in the hobby? Because that term has become kind of a throwaway line now. But what do you think they mean when they say 10x the hobby?
I was going to do a podcast about that, but I guess maybe I won't now. Just kind of
Sorry.
Basically, there's a book that just came out that implies that 10x is by Dan Sullivan, who's actually was the executive coach of one of my mentors. So he's a very top-notch executive coach. The title of the book is something like 10x is easier than 2x. And basically what it's, again, I don't know if Michael Rubin's read the book or is I haven't got the book, but it's just coming out. And basically the thesis, I think, is that if you have a lofty goal like that, you think big. And so, but the 10x is going to take time, but you're not looking for you'll take some incremental gains, but you're thinking big. And so to me, that's international. It's broadening, like Rich and I were talking, broadening the market, widening the audience. And so I hope it's not 10xing the price or 10xing the production of the basic sets that we've come to know and love and that have an equilibrium with supply and demand. They've got to keep that. They've got to still treat it like a collectible. So 10x is not just a slogan, it's an approach to thinking big. I guess I just did that podcast in about 60 seconds.
Hey, speed podcast.
Speed podcast.
So I'm no longer going to do 15 minutes on podcasts. I'm going to do 15-second podcasts maybe.
On YouTube, they call them shorts.
Yeah.
Look at Rich. Comment up here was, yes, I had the PTSD look when they mentioned the Chiefs. Sorry, I lost up here. The Panini can put it out every 6 months. That was talking about the cards. It was about Topps's WWE, when they had it the last time, in the UFC, when they had the Chrome going back 3 years, that Panini's only had it for 3 years. What in 3 years did they do to lose it, or is it just Fanatics coming in?
It's swimming against the current. I just think if Fanatics, it's at the point now, Fanatics has a different business model, and so I think the active players, associations, leagues like that business model better. They're going to get a cut, and they're buying into the 10x. Do they want to be that, or do they want to be with the underdog?
So the hobby's really gone a 180 in 3 years, because 3 years ago,
Well, Panini was the disruptor. When Panini came in and they did all these parallels and all this color and all that stuff, that took especially basketball to the next level by adding these complications. And Rich and I, we know the guys, so that really increased the market. It probably 10x'd basketball over the last 10 or 15 years. But now Fanatics is not only going to be the enduring incumbent, they're also doing the disrupting, and they've assumed market leadership pretty quickly, and so Panini is a distant second now in the perception of going forward of collectors.
Jim is right about Panini really exploding the basketball card market. We're coming up on our 10-year anniversary of the first synagogue show I did at Adat Havarim. And when I was asking Tracy Hackler for things, he goes, "You didn't ask me for National Treasure." I said, "You're not going to send me National Treasure." I asked for Hoops retail packs because I figured it was the worst thing they were doing, but I wanted to give away packs at the door. And I figured I'll ask for the worst thing you have, because if I ask for the worst thing you have, you'll probably give it to me. They actually gave me better than that. God bless them for that. But I asked them for what I thought would be the thing that they'd be so thrilled to put into people's hands, because they weren't being bought at the stores.
And they're entry level type.
They're entry level.
That was totally appropriate, Rich.
Right. Yeah. But Tracy actually went to me and he says, "Everybody asked me for National Treasure." I said, "Tracy, I know better." Maybe for a grand prize, yes, but I'm not going to ask you for National Treasure for giveaways at the door.
That would be it. Can you imagine giving away? That'd be the synagogue show of all synagogue shows.
But if you did, Rich, you would 10x the synagogue show.
I never really had a 10x that show. As a matter of fact, now, and you've been in the new building, if I 10x that building, it's too much.
The fire
I have to be two. I'm actually looking for a maximum of 1.5 or 2x. Yeah. Because otherwise it's too crowded. And when I say too crowded, I really mean too crowded.
I wanted to get back to the comments on growing the hobby, the 10x. And one of the comments you guys both made was growing the sports. And Dr. Beck, you just made the comment about basketball growing so much and Panini growing that. Well, the women's basketball and the women's cards have exploded in the last couple of years. Caitlin Clark's Superfractor just set a record of $78,000, most expensive women's basketball card of all time. With the popularity in the WNBA, but really college products and college stars, is this a growth area, Rich? Seeing more coming through that you know of?
I don't know what comes in every day. I see some of it. I don't see all of it, but I will tell you that if it's a growth, it's good for ComC, it's good for the hobby, it's good for everybody. And we have women's basketball players are now finally getting the publicity they've always should have had. And I think that's a big thing. The Carol Blajowskis and the Ann Donovans and the Lucy Harrises and all the great players of the 70s and 80s, even Cheryl Miller. What?
Nancy Lieberman Klein's the only one.
Nancy Lieberman Klein. Well, Nancy got a little more pub because, at least in Dallas, she lives in the area. Yeah. And Myers Drysdale. All these people, they never got enough cards. They never got enough publicity. Now they're all getting the publicity. It's still an accessible sport. There was a young lady, I forgot her name. She just dropped 51 points for USC, I believe, last night.
Yeah, Juju
And,
Watkins. Yep.
and she's like a freshman, I think, and like just an amazing player. And she dropped 50. They scored 65 points. She dropped 51 of the 65. I mean,
yeah. And Caitlin Clark is already doing State Farm commercials.
Caitlin Clark is going to end up as the number one scorer, assuming nothing drastic happens, and you can always get hurt. Caitlin Clark is going to end up as the number one NCAA male or female point producer of all time. She's going to beat Pete Maravich later this year.
Yeah, 3 years of Pete Maravich, but yeah, guys, basketball. I don't want to make this a news flash, but NBA basketball cards are not going to 10x. They've already 10x'd. Women's basketball can 10x, and that, like I said, I think that's Fanatics' mindset. They're seeing college cards in general, Bowman U, those kinds of pre-professional cards that can 10x. Soccer can probably still 10x. Non-sport entertainment can 10x. TCGs, I'm not sure they can 10x.
In fact,
one of them already had this huge increase. So if you look at like the Wayne Gretzky, look to what hasn't done their 10x already. Football probably can't 10x. Baseball can't 10x because the numbers are already too big. I don't think you're going to get 10 times as many baseball card collectors, but you could get 10 times as many collectors.
One of the things that is the WNBA, and somebody put this in the comments, doesn't pay as much as it does for the women who go over and play in Europe. I wonder with the NILs and the advertising, and the marketing that the players can do now, that it helps offset their income to where they can stay in the States. Because I think that'll really be what grows the game. Is if
also
stay in the States, they stay in college. They can't afford to go pro because the NIL money. Caitlin Clark, she's not in a hurry to get to the WNBA. When she gets there, she may set a new standard. But I think I think the owners, I don't know if they collude, but I think there's a salary scale there. And when you have these mega stars, it's gonna disrupt that. But that's fine. And hopefully the pie will get bigger so the players can get a proportionate share of a bigger pie.
The pile is getting bigger, albeit a little more slowly than some sports. But after what happened with Brittany Griner, the WNBA realized they had to pay more money to their players. So the salaries have gone up considerably because they don't want people going back to Russia to get detained again.
Right.
So there is going to be some of that too. That's a red flag. That what happened with her became a red flag for WNBA players.
Egg on their face for sure. But you know what? When you're looking at the WNBA, is there any WNBA game now, even the final, the last game of the finals, is that a hotter ticket than anything Iowa right now?
No, Iowa tickets are en fuego.
So I'm just saying. So it's flipped, and so anybody thinks, if it's a college card, not a big deal. High school card, not a big deal. It's got to be in their pro uniform. That is being disrupted right now by Caitlin Clark and others. And so be careful what you think will always be true.
I mean, women's basketball may be the most successful Bowman U product.
Well, on secondary market sale.
Well, yeah.
but that drives, that'll be sold out.
Yeah.
But there are other good cards in there, but that's, yeah.
One thing I'd be interested in is that on YouTube, Wild World of Sports actually covered, because the ABC network had the NBA license at the time. They actually covered Pete Maravich's first professional game, not his first NBA game, but his first professional game. And you can still watch the video. And it was taken very seriously. if all of a sudden somebody starts covering Caitlin Clark's first professional games with that seriousness, then you know women's basketball has really arrived.
Well, they're already doing it with their college games. I mean, she's getting primetime billing. If you watch when she goes on the road, the road teams are selling out with lines around, down the street and around the building. And Dr. Beckett's right. There's not a hotter ticket in the WNBA than Caitlin Clark is right now in college.
So that correlates with the hobby.
Well,
There's a popularity there, and the men's college game and March Madness was always a bigger deal than a regular season NBA game. Maybe not the finals, but the college game is really interesting. The pros, they play the same teams over and over again every year. You catch them when they come in town. I've had season tickets. It's not a bad thing, but this is a singular moment when Caitlin Clark breaks the record, as Rich says, which will happen in a couple weeks, in a week or two.
Yeah.
Rich?
She has 9 games left, I believe. It'll be it's like 3 or 4 games.
Yeah.
Real quick before we get out of here, neglected to mention that Leaf acquired Press Pass. I don't know if that moves anybody's meter, but they're staying active. I noticed they also picked up the Professional Bowlers Association license.
You also didn't mention MetaZoo closed down shop.
MetaZoo, speaking of trading card games, that was Steve Aoki was one of the partners in that. They've closed their doors. And I wonder if that'll add value, if it'll actually add secondary value to their cards, or if they'll just disappear into the abyss.
Well, if nobody was playing the game, there's the old rule. If nobody was playing the game at the time, 20 years from now, everybody will say, hey, wait a second, these cards are really rare or rarer. Let's buy them. So there's always that long-term play.
Real long-term maybe on that one. All right.
Can I say one thing about the Leaf thing? It demonstrates that Leaf was not Brian Gray only, that there's some creative people over at Leaf. Even though the company was kind of founded or formed in Brian's image, it's now, moving forward with Brian's same kind of aggressiveness of trying to acquire underappreciated assets. And I want Leaf to be successful. I'd like for the Press Pass brand to be resurrected because I think there's some legacy there. And so I'm in favor of those things. I think it shows the vibrancy of the hobby. The hobby's always been this, what's going on now, but then there's always a nostalgic thing. And even though we don't think the Press Pass is vintage, it's sort of vintage in the eyes of a lot of the collectors because it's old.
All right. Well, I'm going to bring it home. I always love to know what everybody's doing on their hobby weekend because we always do something with cards. Rich, you doing anything card related?
I'm at the office working, so
what's your card
I'm doing some work even when I'm doing this. My week was a really funky week, so I'm working on the Sabbath, which I don't like to do, but it is what it is. By the way, Danny, I loved your interview with the Rated Rabbi the other day. I met him at the National. He's a cool guy. I still want him to run a show in the Baltimore area. I told him if he flies me up, I'd help him with it.
All right.
Yes, I'm trying to get him to. He's not far from me, so we're going to try to get together. David's a good guy.
Oh, and I do want to point out for those and I have to send out to my mailing list. On the other side of the universe, our good friend Kyle Robertson is doing a non-sports card show at the Waters Creek Convention Center next weekend. I will be there to walk around. I mean, obviously, that's not a place where I'm going to go dime box hunting or dollar box hunting or quarter box hunting because there's going to be no sports cards. But it should be fun to see how the other half lives.
I tried to get Valentine's points with Diane for not going to the show, Rich. I said, there's a show the weekend before Valentine's Day, and sweetheart, I just wanted you to know I'm not going.
That's a good one, but this is so close to the office that if I show up at the office, I can walk there, so it's a little harder for me.
However, I will be watching the Super Bowl that same weekend.
You're not opening Top Series 1?
No, I'm not opening Top Series 1 on whatever that is, Wednesday.
Right.
Cut it down, Danny. I'm ready.
Well, you know what? And let this be a good reminder for everybody. If you have not bought your Valentine's Day cards, as I am just remembering, we are 11 days away.
Did you Freudian slip that? You said if you have not bought your Valentine's Day cards.
Oh, to be.
Dan, what have you got on the side, young man? Who's your side piece's name?
To clear it up before we leave, I buy one funny card and one romantic card every year. So that's why I said cards. You're going to get me in trouble, guys. Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's our job, to get you in trouble.
I seem to do it on my own, but I appreciate the help as always. Anything else before we head out? Otherwise, you guys have a great weekend. I appreciate
the show was good. We had a lot of fun. I do want to stress, and this is what I'm, when I went on that little rant, I think Fanatics does a great job. I just want them to do even better, because if you really want to 10x, sometimes blocking and tackling gets you to 10x. Vince Lombardi won all the Super Bowls. He basically told you what plays were coming. They still did it better. They told you what plays were coming, and they still did it better. And they still ran the sweeps, and they ran the things. And 3rd and 1 from their own 36, they throw a bomb to Boyd Dowler or Carroll Dale and score a 64-yard touchdown. And if you do the simple things well, everything else falls in. So Fanatics does a lot of great things. I just want them to do even better.
Now, on that note, thank everybody for episode 238. Next Saturday, I forget who's in the hot seat, but it'll be episode 239, Saturday morning, 11 a.m. On Bench Clear. And we appreciate it, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Danny.